Hi, and welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Tonight, we have a returning guest. This is Jessica Vaughn. She is the Director of Policy Studies from the Center of Immigration Studies. And we'd like to thank Jessica for coming on to our program. Good evening, Jessica. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you, Andrew.
And last time you were on our program was way back when things were normal in the spring of 2018. At that time, we were discussing illegal immigration coming across our southern border, but there appeared to be somewhat of a fix on the horizon under President Donald Trump. The wall was being built. Border security personnel were actually given respect and knowledge and not silenced.
When we last spoke in 2018, things were relatively under control at the border.
Yes, and illegal immigration basically slowed to almost a trickle under Donald Trump. But now,
Yes.
in just 3 years, almost to the date, really, Jessica, can you give us an overview of what has taken place since the spring of 2018 in terms of our southern border and the illegal crossings?
Yes, I sure can. And this has really been a good illustration of the fact that the border can be controlled. The Trump administration instituted a variety of different policies and initiatives, really a layered approach to getting control of the border. First of all, by building infrastructure. The wall itself is very helpful to the Border Patrol in slowing down illegal crossings. We know that the wall works now. Well, we knew before, but there's even more proof that it works now. And also, robust enforcement in the interior of the country helps a lot. So ending catch and release, so that people don't get the idea if they can get through, they'll be allowed to stay here without any chance of deportation. But also changing the asylum policy so that people could no longer get away with showing up at the border, especially with children, claiming that they fear return to their home country and believing that they are going to get into the country to live for years and never even bother filing an asylum claim or not showing up for their hearings. That whole scam of gaming our asylum system was shut down by Trump. And also, he used diplomacy to make deals with Central American countries and Mexico to get them to control their borders and to not be a doormat for the smuggling organizations that were making so much money bringing people in. And we know by studying the Census Bureau data on the number of immigrants in the country, both recent arrivals and people who've been living here a long time, that all of these policies resulted in a decline in the growth of illegal immigration. Not only were fewer people coming, but more people were leaving on their own because the laws were being enforced in the interior of the country as well. ICE was going after gang members, fugitives, criminals, people who skipped out on their immigration hearings. It was, really a message to the world that we were serious about enforcing immigration laws, and that really worked. We saw, some people on the open borders side want people to believe that illegal immigration is inevitable, that there's nothing we can do about it. So we might as well make it legal. We might as well have amnesties. We shouldn't even try to control the border. That is not true. We can control illegal immigration. It just takes will to do it. So now, now enter the Biden administration. Joe Biden, throughout the campaign and at the beginning of his administration, said, well, we're going to stop the wall construction. I'm not going to enforce the law in the interior. We're going to have a moratorium on deportations. I want to pass a massive amnesty for everyone living here illegally. And, despite all the warnings from the career people in the immigration agencies that this was a big mistake, that we were going to cause an influx of people coming to the border again, He went ahead with these reckless policies, and lo and behold, now things are completely out of control. We have record numbers of people showing up at the border, bringing children with them because Joe Biden has told people that he's not going to deport people who come with families and that they're going to be resettled in American communities. Many of them we know from talking to the migrants are coming to Massachusetts, and they're going to Texas and to Northern Virginia and Long Island and California and Tennessee and Kentucky. They're spreading out all over the country, and communities around our country are going to be in for a difficult time. They need to, but Biden shows no sense of even realizing how bad things are, much less actually doing something about it. So that's where we are now.
Well, that leads me to ask you a couple of questions. What about the all? There's so many unaccompanied minors crossing the border. Now, I was listening to the radio. It was earlier today, and they're saying that basically the unaccompanied minors are being called up by people who are already illegally in the country. Is that accurate, or are these just people sending their children up across the border? I mean, what are with all these unaccompanied minors?
Well, it's a few different scenarios right now. The Biden administration would like people to believe that these are stray children wandering by themselves to, make suddenly somehow make it across the Rio Grande on their own. That is not what is happening. This is very organized. It is partly parents who are living here in the United States illegally who are paying smugglers to bring the kids that they left behind. In some cases, it is families in Central America who have heard Joe Biden say that they are not going to deport kids, sending their kids up to live with friends or family. And, again, paying a smuggler to bring them in and planning to join their child later, knowing that there is not going to be any enforcement of immigration laws against them and that the kid might qualify for an amnesty. And some of it actually is kids who are being rented out by the smuggling organizations to create fake families that can be used to get other people in. They think they'll be treated leniently if they're caught with a child. And in some cases, it's criminal organizations like gangs, MS-13. We know that they take advantage of our lax policies at the border to get their gang members in to join cliques of the gang here already in the United States.
So what's the truth about the theme of kids in cages?
Well, the cages were built by the Obama administration originally because the Border Patrol stations were not designed to have kids in custody. They were designed for single adults. And that's traditionally what illegal immigration was for a very long time until the Obama administration changed the policies to, in effect, give kids a free pass when they come illegally with a smuggler. They interpreted a provision of a 2008 law that any kid who arrives without a parent is a so-called unaccompanied minor and is entitled to special treatment. They're entitled to be released into the country. They're entitled to be named a ward of the state and eligible for benefits. And they're entitled to a special green card called a special immigrant juvenile green card. And so, who wouldn't take advantage of that? Parents started sending their kids over to take advantage of this. That the way the Obama administration got control of it was to detain the kids before processing, and also detain families with kids. But that all came to an end. They got control of it, but eventually a federal judge in California told the Obama administration that they could no longer detain kids the way that they had been. And so they stopped, and then more people started to come. It slowed down when Trump was first elected and then started to pick up. And then Trump tried to shut it down by actually penalizing the parents who were coming with their kids. And the kids at that time were not kept in cages per se. They were put into a foster care system, but that blew up. It was essentially the same thing that it had been done by the Obama administration when the kids were first apprehended, but that became a political disaster, as we all know. And so they came up with these other policies that we've already been discussing. But now what's happening is they're not using the Biden administration doesn't want to use quote unquote cages. So they have, instead of using chain link to separate the kids by age and to keep the girls separate from the boys and so on, now they have plastic sheeting that is used to create different pods for the kids. And some people have dubbed this kids in terrariums instead of kids in cages.
Very,
But
very interesting, because we have seen the photos that have been leaked out.
Terrible.
For the longest time. The Biden administration wouldn't let any of the press in, and now, the cat's out of the bag. You actually have, I was watching Senator Rubio. He went to the border, and
yeah.
we see all these senators now saying, look, this is the problem, and Biden administration does not want to do anything about
It is a
it.
disaster. I mean, it's not okay. I shouldn't joke about it. But it's not okay. They could get control of it. It wouldn't be necessary if they would go back to the policies of not letting kids and parents exploit the system of returning people home quickly instead of letting them all stay. But what is interesting is that, the journalists seem to be pretty much missing in criticizing this. I haven't seen any lawsuits yet against the Biden administration like the Trump administration had to endure. Um, there is certainly a double standard in how this is being covered in the media. There's no doubt about that.
And another thing that's not being covered in the media is these border crossers. From what I hear, not all are from Central or Southern South America or Mexico, or many are coming in from Asia and even the Middle East.
That's right. And it shouldn't be surprising when our government is broadcasting the message that, if you come, you will be allowed to, with the child, you'll be allowed to enter and be put into a system that will take care of you. And in all likelihood, you'll never be made to go home again. Who wouldn't take advantage of that? The smugglers are making so much money that it shouldn't be a surprise that others are trying to get in on this lucrative trade. And what we have found is that different smugglers specialize in bringing people from different parts of the world, and they have their own pipelines of people. Usually they find ways to get them to Ecuador. And from Ecuador, they will use boats to get them up further north into Panama or into Colombia to cross over into Panama, and then use ground transportation to get them up near the US border. And then they pay the cartels, which control the border from the Mexico side. They have their own specialized places, they call them plazas, where they do their smuggling. And we know that different nationalities come over in different places, like the Haitians go to Laredo. There's another place where the Venezuelans go. Middle Eastern groups usually cross in Texas. So it's very concerning that now people are coming from all over the world. This has become a global trafficking network, really. And the federal government, under the Biden administration policies, is enabling and facilitating and completing the smuggling journey, the smuggling transaction for these families.
Not to mention there's no COVID-19 protocol as well.
Well, and I was just going to get into that, but it's interesting, Jessica, you said you don't mean to make light of it, but yet the woman who has been put in charge of the border crisis is Vice President Kamala Harris, and she seems to find a lot to giggle about. Additionally, she's never been down to the border yet to see what's going on, and she seems to want to wash her hands of this crisis. But putting that aside, let's get on to the other issues that come across with these people who are now unvetted. We don't know who they are. So I'd like to talk about some of that sort of medically. And right now, as we come out, maybe hopefully, of this year-long pandemic, we think of obviously the COVID virus coming through with a lot of people, and we know the numbers are up on that. But there's also other communicable diseases such as TB and some other diseases that have basically been eradicated in this country that are coming with these people. Oh, what about the other issues such as drugs, gangs, terrorists? Could you talk a little bit about all of those things, the many diseases that are coming?
Well, this is the thing is when we don't control our border, we have no idea who's coming across. And there are two problems. One is that anyone coming with a child is allowed to enter and eventually be released and go on living here, sometimes getting a work permit. And people will, especially the organized criminal groups, will take advantage of that. But even more concerning is the fact that the smuggling groups actually use the families that are coming across. Some of these families may be coming just, to get a better life. In fact, most of them are coming because, they're opportunists. They know what's going on. They think this is a good time, and they're right. But what the smugglers do is send across large groups of families with kids to occupy the border patrol in near the border, because it's like a diversionary tactic. They know that the border patrol is going to have to use all of its staff and personnel to process large groups of families, and that's very time consuming. And so while the border patrol is distracted with that, they will send drugs across in a different area, and individuals, criminals, prior deportees, gang members, anyone who's paying them. There have been cases of people associated with terror groups as well. They go across while the border patrol is distracted, and we don't know who is getting through that way, but we assume that the ones who don't want to get caught are going that way. And the border patrol has told us that they think now that there are 3 people getting through that we don't know about, than for every one that the border patrol is actually apprehending. Whereas before it was more 50-50, which is bad enough. But now 3 times as many people going through undetected, and they're not staying in the border areas. They're coming into communities all over the country. And that's usually, the types who are engaged in drug trafficking or gangs or other kinds of criminal activity and organized crime that we're really going to have to worry about.
Now, what about the whole COVID thing? I mean, everyone in this country is at a fever pitch with no pun intended, with the pandemic. We hear that the numbers, and they're living in very close quarters once they get here. It's in the high teens of percentage of people who are testing COVID positive. What's the reality that you're to understand?
Yes, this is a big problem. At first, the Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security were so overwhelmed that they did not have the ability to test people to discover whether or not they were carrying COVID. They were simply releasing people and saying that they hoped that the border communities and the charitable organizations that were trying to help the migrants would do that. And in some cases it was done, in some cases it was not. Now, the Biden administration has implemented testing at the facilities that are processing the migrants. And what they have found is that it is a 19% average COVID positive rate, because very few people in these other countries have been vaccinating their populations. They don't have the ability to do it. And again, the smuggling process itself is conducive to spreading this.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's so alarming that people, other employees of the Department of Homeland Security who've been asked to go to the border to volunteer because they're so overwhelmed. They want to bring in staff from other parts of the country. They're refusing to go because they're concerned about being exposed when 1 in 5 people that they have to process and be in close contact with is positive for COVID. I mean, they have, these DHS staff have families too. And we simply don't have the ability to prevent COVID from being spread through this disaster that's happening now. And that's not even talking about the fact that Mexicans and citizens of other countries are coming in on visas also into border towns and and ending up in US hospitals to be treated for COVID. It's not a coincidence that El Paso, for example, has one of the highest rates of COVID infections in the entire country. And it's to a large degree because people are coming in even through the legal ports of entry and taking advantage of US healthcare to get treatment for it.
Sure. And then to compound on all of this, there were reports, and you can validate this and talk maybe a little about it, although we are at 4.5 minutes, but that one of the ways to sort of decompress what was happening at the border is that the Biden administration was putting people on buses and airplanes and sending them off and jetting them off to different parts of the United States just to get that sort of bolus of people coming across away from the border. And that was distributing everything further still.
That's exactly right. They want to get these people out of the border area and spread out across the country. I think they're hoping that way nobody notices what's going on and they don't have to listen to complaints about, kids in confinement and so on. And, there's no question their goal is to process everyone as quickly as possible or not at all, and hope that, I guess, people don't notice, which is, it's really a problem because ultimately the price for this disaster is going to be borne by taxpayers in the communities that end up having to accommodate these families and kids that are resettling here illegally. It's an enormous strain on the school system, on the healthcare system, on public housing and social services of all kind, and public safety also, as it turns out, because of the fact that we have criminal organizations bringing people in under the radar. This is not something that's can be swept under the rug. And I think that the Biden administration is going to pay a political price for it, but not before taxpayers pay a huge price first.
Well, I think of 4 years ago or more, 6 years ago, when it was the Obama administration, we used to hear about planes and buses coming into Massachusetts, and communities would receive 50 to 100 illegals at that time. And people started getting outraged when it affected and impacted their own children in school. So, here we go, that this is kind of what we're looking at. Andrew, I think we've only got a couple of minutes to go. I just had to kill my clock, my stopwatch, because my phone went off. So I know we have less than 2 minutes, but I think we're going to continue this conversation next month, because I think we need to explore so many things. Andrew, you still have a whole list of questions to ask, but one of the worst things we just saw over the last couple of days is 2 little girls, 3 years old and 5 years old, I believe they were sisters, being literally dropped over the border fence in one of the communities in the United States, one of the southern communities, in a desert. So they would have literally been abandoned by themselves, except for the fact that there were cameras on the border fence, on the United States side of the border fence, and they caught these 2 little girls being literally dropped 14 feet. Fortunately, the little girls were rescued. They were not injured, which is just beyond credible how that even happened.
I read an article this morning, as a matter of fact, where they say the Border Patrol saved an infant from the river that she was just tossed overboard.
and there wasn't, what, a 9-year-old girl drowned. Jessica,
Yep.
when we talk, we are going to have so much more. This is not, should not be a partisan issue. This is a human rights issue. And unfortunately, this is where we've come to in this country.
It's true. I can't imagine any policy more immoral that entices people to put their kids in the hands of criminal smugglers who treat people this way. And we should be proud of our Border Patrol that has the ability and the wherewithal to save these people who are being so abused by these criminal smuggling organizations. But we should not have the policies that facilitate it. That is ultimately the problem.
Correct, correct. So we'll talk again next month. And I'd just like to leave all of our viewers with, we are the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. To us, the GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people. And that includes those crossing the border, and they're not getting any of that when they come across at the bequest of cartels. It's easy to be a communist in a free society, but try being free in a communist society. With that, we would like to thank you all for being with us tonight. Jessica, certainly we look forward to continuing this conversation, and thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and